I was sleeping over at my best friend's house when my parents appeared at 2 a.m. saying we leave now. The headlights cut through Nolan's bedroom window at exactly 2:14 a.m. I know because I checked my phone when the doorbell started ringing. Not the polite single press of someone who cares about waking people up. The sustained, aggressive lean that says emergency. Nolan sat up first, his face pale in the darkness. What the hell? Then I heard my father's voice through the door downstairs, sharp and commanding in a way I'd never heard before. Get my son. Now. I was already moving, grabbing my shoes, my stomach twisting because Dad had driven 3 hours in the middle of the night to Nolan's family lake house. Mom was standing by the car when I got outside, her arms wrapped around herself despite the summer heat. She wouldn't look at me. Dad's hand clamped on my shoulder the second I stepped onto the porch. In the car. We'll explain on the road. Nolan's parents stood in the doorway in their bathrobes, confused and alarmed. My sleeping bag was still on Nolan's floor. My best friend since 4th grade watched from his window as we pulled away. Nobody spoke for the first 30 minutes. I sat in the back seat, watching highway lights blur past, my heart hammering. Every question I tried to ask died in my throat because of the way Mom was crying. Not loud sobbing. Silent tears that caught the dashboard light. Dad's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Finally, he pulled into a rest stop, killed the engine, and turned to face me. His eyes were bloodshot. Your friend Nolan. How well do you actually know his father? The question made no sense. Mr. Brennan? He's been coaching our hockey team for 6 years. Why? Dad's jaw worked. Because 3 hours ago the FBI raided our house looking for evidence that I'd been covering up his activities. Someone sent them an anonymous package with doctored financial records suggesting I'd been helping him move money offshore. Our home is a crime scene right now, Ethan. They have forensic teams going through everything we own. Mom's voice cracked. They took my computer, my files from work. They took your laptop and phone records going back 2 years. The world tilted. Mr. Brennan was the guy who bought pizza after every game, who'd helped me with my college application essay, who'd given me rides home 100 times when my parents were working late. What activities? What are you talking about? Dad pulled out his phone, hands shaking as he opened an email. The FBI wouldn't tell us everything, but the agent who was slightly more human than the others pulled me aside. Told me that Brennan has been under investigation for 18 months. Financial fraud, embezzlement from his company, and worse. He couldn't say it. Mom turned around, her face destroyed. There are allegations involving minors, multiple families. The investigation started when a girl from his daughter's soccer team came forward last year. I thought about Nolan's sister, Kelsey. Sweet kid, always drawing pictures for everyone. She was 14. The FBI thinks you helped him? Dad's laugh was bitter. Someone constructed an incredibly detailed false trail. Bank accounts in my name I never opened, emails I never sent. Communication records between me and Brennan discussing asset protection. They showed me printouts. It's my email address, my digital signature, my employee ID numbers from the hospital. Except I never wrote any of it. The rest, stop bathroom fluorescence, hummed while I threw up everything in my stomach. When I came back, Dad had pulled up news on his phone. Local news was already running the story. Prominent cardiologist under investigation in connection with youth hockey coach's alleged crimes. Our address was in the article. My name wasn't, but I went to the same school as everyone on Nolan's team. By Monday morning, everyone would know. We left you at Nolan's house because we trusted them, Mom whispered. We've had dinner with them 50 times. We went on vacation together 2 years ago. And now the FBI is asking if we left you there deliberately, if we were part of some network. She covered her face. The implication hit me. Dad started the car again. We have a lawyer meeting us at a hotel in 2 hours. Everything we say from now on, everything we do, it's all going to be scrutinized. The agent told me privately that they've seen this before. Someone close to the primary target gets framed to muddy the investigation. Make it look like a conspiracy theory when it's really one guilty person trying to create reasonable doubt. The hotel room smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. The lawyer was already there when we arrived at 5 a.m., a sharp woman named Vivian Cross, who looked like she hadn't slept in days. She had 3 associates with her and enough file boxes to fill the room's small table. The good news is that the FBI's case against you, Dr. Reeves, appears to be based entirely on fabricated digital evidence. The bad news is that the fabrication is sophisticated enough that it's going to take weeks to prove it's fake. She opened a laptop and showed us transaction logs. Someone with advanced knowledge of both banking systems and your hospital's internal network created this. They knew your employee ID, your professional email routing codes, your bank account numbers. This isn't amateur hour. Dad leaned forward. Gerald Brennan had access to all of that. I gave him a ride home from the rink 4 months ago when his car wouldn't start. He used my laptop to email his wife because his phone was dead. I was in the room the whole time. Vivian's expression didn't change. The FBI will say you're establishing an alibi. Everything you tell me, assume they'll interpret in the worst possible light. Mom's phone started buzzing at 6:30 a.m. Then Dad's. Then mine, which they'd let me keep since the FBI had already cloned it. Text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Sick fucking family. Hope you rot in prison. Everyone knows what you did. Someone had leaked our personal cell numbers to a Facebook group. Vivian confiscated all our phones without a word, powered them down, and locked them in her briefcase. This is witness intimidation and possibly obstruction. We're documenting everything. One of her associates was already on his laptop, screen recording the messages before they could be deleted. The FBI won't protect you from this. They'll say you brought it on yourselves by fleeing the scene. Dad's voice was hollow. We didn't flee. We removed our son from a potentially dangerous situation. Vivian's look said we were naive. You left at 2 a.m. without informing the investigating agents. They'd already told you not to leave the property. You violated a direct instruction from federal law enforcement. That's not good, Dr. Reeves. The first news van appeared outside the hotel at 8 a.m. We watched from the window as reporters set up cameras in the parking lot. By 9, there were 4. Vivian had someone at the front desk redirect calls, but my phone, even powered off in her briefcase, had 53 voicemails when she checked it hours later. Your story is the secondary headline, she told us, showing her iPad. The primary is Brennan. They arrested him this morning at his home. His wife and children were taken into protective custody, pending investigation of what they knew. I thought about Nolan, my best friend, waking up to FBI agents handcuffing his father, about Kelsey watching her dad being led away. Whatever Brennan had done, they were victims too. The FBI found physical evidence at the Brennan residence, Vivian continued. I have a contact who says it's substantial. Multiple hard drives, documents, photographs. The allegations aren't theoretical anymore. This is a prosecution case, not an investigation. Mom made a sound like something dying. We'd let me sleep at that house dozens of times. The deeper horror came in pieces over the next 6 hours. Vivian's team worked their connections, building a timeline of what the FBI actually had. Gerald Brennan had been under surveillance since March of the previous year, when a 15-year-old girl named Ashley Portman told her therapist that the hockey coach had been sending her inappropriate messages. The therapist reported it. The FBI started monitoring Brennan's digital communications and financial transactions. What they found was bigger than one victim. Brennan had been using his position as a youth sports coach for nearly a decade. He'd coached hockey, soccer, and baseball in 3 different towns across 2 states. The FBI had identified at least 11 potential victims so far, ranging in age from 12 to 17. Most were kids from families he'd befriended, kids whose parents trusted him, kids like me who'd spent countless hours in his car, his home, his orbit, and I'd never seen it, never suspected. How could I be that blind? You're not blind, Vivian said when I asked her that question out loud. Predators are skilled at manipulation. They build trust over years. They choose victims carefully. They create environments where disclosure is unlikely. She showed me a document, heavily redacted. This is from the FBI's investigative summary. Brennan had a pattern. He targeted families with single parents or parents who worked long hours. He positioned himself as a mentor. He created opportunities to be alone with kids by offering rides, extra coaching sessions, overnight team trips. He normalized boundary violations gradually. A hand on the shoulder that lasted too long. Comments about physical development disguised as coaching. He groomed entire communities, not just individual victims. The document listed the Portman family. The girl's father had died 3 years ago. Her mother worked night shifts as an ER nurse. Brennan had offered to give Ashley extra goalie training. Your family didn't fit his victim profile, Vivian said quietly. 2 parents, stable home, father with medical expertise who'd recognize warning signs. That's likely why he targeted you differently. He used you as a character witness, the good kid from the good family who could vouch for him. The fabricated evidence against Dad made sickening sense now. Brennan knew he was being investigated. He'd probably known for months. So he started building insurance. Frame someone credible, create enough confusion to delay prosecution, give himself time to destroy evidence or flee, except he hadn't counted on the FBI moving as fast as they did. Vivian pulled up another document. The raid on your house was simultaneous with Brennan's arrest. They coordinated it specifically to prevent either family from warning the other. The anonymous package that triggered the investigation into your father arrived at the FBI field office by courier on Thursday afternoon, 72 hours ago. The FBI traced the courier service to a package drop that accepts cash. No surveillance cameras in that location. Whoever sent it knew exactly what they were doing. Dad's voice was barely audible. How long until they realize I didn't send those emails? Vivian's smile was grim. My forensic team is already on it. The metadata on those emails shows inconsistencies. The IP addresses route through a VPN, but the timestamps don't match your hospital shift schedules. On 3 of the dates those emails were allegedly sent, you were in surgery with witnesses. We'll prove it. But it's going to take time. Time we didn't have. By Sunday afternoon, our house was on the news. Someone had posted our address on social media with the caption, "Pedophile Protector Lives Here." A brick went through our front window at 11 p.m. The police took a report, but told Vivian there wasn't much they could do about online vigilantism. You need to understand what you're facing, she told my parents at midnight in the hotel conference room. Even when we prove the emails are fake, there will be people who don't believe it. There will be conspiracy theories. The association with Brennan will follow your family for years. Your son is going into his senior year of high school. His college applications are going to be affected by this. Your medical practice, Dr. Reeves, is going to lose patients. Your wife's job at the nonprofit is likely already fielding calls. She wasn't being cruel. She was being realistic. The FBI is not your friend here. They're not looking to clear your name. They're trying to build the strongest possible case against Brennan, and if that means letting suspicion linger around you to pressure him into a confession, they'll do it. Mom quit her job Monday morning. Not fired, not asked to leave. She resigned in an email sent at 4 a.m. because she couldn't stomach the thought of walking into an office where everyone had seen the news. Dad's practice put him on indefinite administrative leave 6 hours later, pending resolution of the ongoing investigation. The hospital board didn't accuse him of anything. They just made it clear that having him treat patients while under FBI scrutiny was a liability they couldn't accept. We'd gone from a normal family to unemployed and radioactive in 72 hours. I was supposed to start my senior year in 2 weeks. Vivian's advice was direct. Don't. Withdraw and homeschool for the year. Your son will be torn apart in that school. Nolan Brennan goes there. The other kids from the hockey team go there. Everyone knows everyone. He'll be targeted, bullied, possibly physically attacked. It's not worth it. I listened to them discuss my life, except I agreed with Vivian. I couldn't go back. Not to that school. Not to those people. Not after this. My phone, still in Vivian's possession, kept collecting messages. By Monday evening, there were over 200. Most were hateful. Some were from people I'd known my entire life. Always thought your family was weird. Your dad gave me creepy vibes at the rink. Hope you all disappear. 3 messages stood out. One from my girlfriend, Brooke. My parents won't let me see you anymore. I'm sorry. We'd been together for 8 months. I'd planned to ask her to homecoming. Another from my hockey teammate, Leo. Coach pulled us together this morning. Said we can't have contact with you while the investigation is ongoing. Legal thing. Sorry, man. The third was from Nolan. Just 4 words. I didn't know either. That one hurt most. Because I believed him. Nolan had been just as blind as me, except now his entire family was destroyed, and his father was a monster. Our friendship, built over years of sleepovers and hockey practices and stupid inside jokes, was obliterated. Not by choice, by proximity to evil. The forensic analysis of the fake emails took 9 days. Vivian's team worked around the clock, and what they found was both vindicating and terrifying. The emails had been created using sophisticated software that spoofed Dad's email address and forged the digital signatures, but the metadata revealed critical errors. The timestamps were wrong by 14 minutes, consistent with someone in a different time zone who'd forgotten to account for daylight saving time. The IP addresses, when traced through layers of VPN tunneling, ultimately originated from a location in Eastern Europe, likely a server farm used by criminal organizations to mask digital activity. Most damning, the emails referenced account numbers for offshore banks that weren't even opened until 3 weeks after the emails were supposedly sent. Whoever made these was skilled but not perfect, Vivian explained, showing us the 50-page technical report her team had compiled. They knew enough to be dangerous, but made small mistakes that prove fabrication. We're presenting this to the FBI tomorrow. Dad's relief was palpable, but Vivian's expression stayed cautious. This proves the emails are fake. It doesn't prove Brennan created them. The FBI accepted the forensic evidence on a Friday, 2 weeks and 3 days after the nightmare started. Special Agent Diana Kozlowski, the lead investigator on Brennan's case, met with us at Vivian's office. She was in her 50s, gray hair pulled back, eyes that had seen too much. Dr. Reeves, based on the technical analysis provided by your attorney, we're satisfied that the communications implicating you in financial crimes were fabricated. We're closing the investigation into your potential involvement. The relief should have been total. It wasn't. Kozlowski kept talking. However, we're not prepared to make a public statement to that effect at this time. The investigation into Mr. Brennan is ongoing, and we don't want to reveal investigative details that could compromise the case. Dad's face went red. You're satisfied I'm innocent, but you won't say so publicly? My career is destroyed. My family's been terrorized. And you want us to just wait while you build your case? Kozlowski's expression didn't change. I understand your frustration, but our priority is prosecuting a serial predator who's harmed multiple children. Your reputation is not my primary concern. Vivian stood up. Then you'll be hearing from us in civil court. Defamation, false arrest, violation of due process. I'll have this office tied up in litigation for years. Kozlowski finally showed emotion, a flicker of annoyance. You weren't arrested, Dr. Reeves. We executed a legal search warrant based on credible evidence. The fact that the evidence turned out to be fabricated doesn't make the warrant invalid. You have no case. She left. We sat in Vivian's office, the silence heavy with rage and helplessness. She's right, Vivian said finally. We probably don't have grounds for a lawsuit against the FBI, but we can go public ourselves, release our forensic analysis, do interviews, control the narrative. Mom shook her head. That makes us look defensive. She was right too. We were trapped in a nightmare with no good exit. The only path forward was to endure until Brennan's trial, whenever that happened, and hope that the truth came out during prosecution. But going public became unavoidable 3 days later when someone leaked the FBI's internal memo clearing Dad to a local reporter. The story ran with the headline, FBI clears, doctor in hockey, coach scandal, victims' families demand answers. The reporter had interviewed Ashley Portman's mother, who understandably was furious that the FBI hadn't publicly cleared Dad sooner. My daughter has been terrified for weeks thinking there was a network protecting Brennan. The FBI knew Dr. Reeves was innocent and said nothing. They let this family suffer to protect their investigation. The article forced the FBI's hand. Kozlowski held a press conference that afternoon confirming that Dad had been cleared of any involvement. Dr. Reeves and his family were victims of a sophisticated fraud perpetrated by the primary suspect in this case. We regret any hardship they experienced. Regret. That was the word she used. Like hardship was a temporary inconvenience and not the complete destruction of our lives. The press conference should have ended it. Instead, it triggered a new wave of attention. National news picked up the story. Family wrongly implicated in child predator case speaks out. Except we hadn't spoken out. We'd been trying to stay invisible, but reporters camped outside the hotel. They called Vivian's office 60 times in one day. They tracked down Dad's former colleagues at the hospital, Mom's friends from her old job, my teachers from school. Everyone wanted a comment. Everyone wanted the inside story. Vivian finally arranged a single interview with a reputable journalist, someone who'd covered similar cases and understood the nuances. We sat in a conference room, cameras rolling, and Dad explained what had happened, how we'd trusted Brennan, how the fabricated evidence had destroyed our lives, how the FBI had cleared us, but the damage was permanent. The interview aired on a Wednesday evening. 3 million people watched it. The response was divided. Half the comments were sympathetic. That poor family. The system failed them. The other half was suspicious. Too convenient. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Why would Brennan frame him specifically? That last question haunted me because I'd been asking it too. Why Dad? Vivian's theory was that Dad was credible and visible, a respected physician whose association with Brennan's crimes would create maximum confusion. But there had to be more. I started going through my memories, trying to find the moment when Brennan had decided Dad was the perfect patsy. It came to me at 3 a.m. one morning, lying in the hotel bed staring at the ceiling. 6 months before the FBI raid, Brennan had asked Dad for a recommendation letter. He was applying for a position as athletic director at a private school, a job that would give him access to even more kids. Dad had written the letter enthusiastically, praising Brennan's dedication and character. The school had called Dad to verify the recommendation. Dad had spent 20 minutes on the phone, telling them how wonderful Brennan was. That phone call was probably recorded. That letter was probably in Brennan's files. If Brennan went down, he wanted to take someone with him, and Dad had provided written and verbal testimony to Brennan's character. Perfect leverage. I told Vivian my theory the next morning. She listened, made notes, and nodded slowly. That fits. The FBI found correspondence between Brennan and the private school. They also found a folder on his computer labeled Insurance with files on several families, including yours. He'd been building leverage against anyone who could testify about his character. Your father's recommendation letter was in that folder. The calculation was chilling. Brennan had spent years cultivating relationships not just to access victims, but to create shields, people who'd vouch for him, people whose reputations would be destroyed if they turned on him. Dad had walked right into it, trying to help someone he thought was a good person. The FBI is using this in their case, Vivian continued. It shows premeditation and sophistication. Brennan didn't just abuse children. He built an entire system to protect himself and deflect blame. The prosecutors love it. I didn't care if the prosecutors loved it. I cared that my father's kindness had been weaponized. School would have started the week after Labor Day. I didn't go. We'd officially withdrawn, and I started online classes through a homeschool program designed for students in crisis. Medical issues, family emergencies, legal situations. I was in the legal situations category. The curriculum was self-paced, which meant I could work ahead and finish early if I wanted. I didn't want to. I had nowhere to be and nothing to do except watch our old life disappear. The rental house we'd moved into was in a town 40 minutes from where we'd lived before. Small place, 2 bedrooms, in a neighborhood where people minded their own business. Dad was still on administrative leave, not fired, but not working. Mom had started applying for remote jobs using her maiden name. We were living off savings and Vivian's payment plan, which was stretching us to breaking. The interview had generated some sympathy, but it had also generated more hatred. Someone created a website called Reeves Family Truth that compiled every negative comment, every conspiracy theory, every piece of speculation about our involvement. The site claimed we were part of a larger network that the FBI was protecting. Vivian tried to get it taken down. The hosting company was in a country with no extradition treaty. The first victim impact statement went public 3 weeks after the FBI press conference. Ashley Portman's mother released it through her attorney, a devastating account of how Brennan had systematically groomed and abused her daughter over an 8-month period. The statement included details about how Brennan had isolated Ashley, manipulated her into secrecy, and threatened her when she tried to pull away. It mentioned that Brennan had talked frequently about his friends who helped him, creating the impression of a larger network. He told my daughter that powerful people protected him. That if she told anyone, his friends would make sure no one believed her. Mrs. Portman's statement mentioned my father by name. Ashley was terrified when she saw Dr. Ann Reeves' name in the news. She thought this confirmed what Brennan had told her about having protection. It wasn't until the FBI explained that Dr. Reeves was also a victim of Brennan's manipulation that my daughter understood she'd been lied to about that too. The statement was meant to exonerate us. Instead, it linked Dad's name to Brennan's crimes in every news article that covered it. 2 more families came forward that week, then 5 more. By October, the FBI had identified 19 victims across 3 states spanning 12 years. Brennan's pattern was consistent. He befriended families, positioned himself as a trusted mentor, created opportunities for isolated contact with children, and exploited that access. The scope was staggering. Each new victim who came forward meant new news coverage. And each piece of news coverage mentioned the investigation, and each mention of the investigation included the detail about the fabricated evidence against my father. We were permanently linked to Brennan's crimes, not as perpetrators, but as side notes, footnotes in a horror story. Dad started drinking. Not heavily, not enough to be obvious, but I noticed the whiskey bottle in the kitchen that hadn't been there before. Mom stopped sleeping. I'd hear her walking around the house at 2 a.m., the same time we'd left Nolan's house that night. I was failing my online classes because I couldn't focus. The assignments felt meaningless compared to the disintegration happening around me. Vivian called in November with news that should have been good. The hospital had offered Dad a settlement. They'd pay him 6 months' salary and provide a neutral reference if he agreed not to sue for wrongful termination. "It's not enough," Vivian said. "You could fight for more, but fighting means discovery, depositions, years of litigation, and no guarantee of winning." Dad took the settlement. The money gave us breathing room, enough to cover rent and expenses while he looked for another job. But finding work as a physician with your name permanently attached to a child abuse scandal was nearly impossible. He applied to 30 positions in 3 months. He got 2 interviews. Both ended the same way. "We'll be in touch." They never were. By January, he'd given up on cardiology and started applying to general practice clinics in rural areas where they were desperate enough not to care about his Google results. He got a job offer in February from a clinic in Montana that served low-income patients. The pay was 1/3 of what he'd made before. He took it. We'd be moving again. I turned 18 in December. The birthday passed without celebration. I was supposed to be preparing for college applications, campus visits, scholarship essays. Instead, I was watching my family pack up what remained of our lives and prepare to relocate to a state where we knew no one. My guidance counselor from the homeschool program reached out, concerned about my transcript. "You're failing 3 classes, Ethan. You need these credits to graduate." I didn't care about graduating. I didn't care about college. I cared about the fact that typing my name into a search engine brought up 50 pages of results linking me to Gerald Brennan. What college would accept me? What employer would hire me? My entire future was poisoned by association. The counselor tried to be encouraging. "You're a victim in this situation. Admissions officers will understand that." I asked her to find me one example of a college publicly stating they'd accepted a student linked to a scandal. She couldn't. Brennan's trial was set for February. Vivian called to let us know that the prosecution wanted me to testify, not as a victim, as a witness to Brennan's manipulation tactics. They wanted me to describe how he'd cultivated trust, how he'd integrated himself into our family, how he'd used his relationship with us to build credibility. "You don't have to do this," Vivian said, "but it would help the case. It shows the jury how sophisticated his grooming methods were." I asked if testifying would help clear our name. She was quiet for a long time. "It won't hurt, but realistically, Ethan, your name is already clear legally. What you're fighting now is public perception, and that's not something a court case can fix." I agreed to testify anyway, not to clear our name. Because I wanted to look Brennan in the face and let him know he'd failed. He'd tried to destroy my father and use us as shields. We were still here, damaged, but breathing. The prosecution team prepped me for 3 days. They asked me every question the defense might ask, poked holes in my testimony, made me repeat details until I could recite them without emotion. "The defense is going to paint you as bitter," the lead prosecutor told me. They'll say you're blaming Brennan for the FBI's mistakes, that you're looking for someone to hold responsible for your family's suffering. You need to stay calm, stick to facts, don't let them make you angry. I asked what happened if I did get angry. She smiled tightly. Then the defense wins. The jury sees a kid with an axe to grind instead of a credible witness. The pressure was suffocating. I wasn't just testifying, I was performing. One wrong word, one emotional outburst, and I'd undermine the entire case against a predator who'd hurt 19 children. The courthouse was surrounded by news vans when we arrived for the trial. Victim advocates had organized a presence, people holding signs supporting the survivors. Counter-protesters were there too, conspiracy theorists who believed Brennan was being framed as part of a larger cover-up. They had signs with Dad's name on them. Who protected Brennan? Follow the money. Vivian hustled us through a side entrance, past security, into a waiting room where the other witnesses were gathering. I saw Ashley Portman's mother. She looked at my father, and for a moment I thought she was going to say something cruel. Instead, she crossed the room and hugged him. I'm sorry for what he did to your family, too. Mom started crying. We sat in that room for 6 hours while the prosecution presented their opening arguments and began calling witnesses. Victims testified first. I couldn't hear their testimony, but I could see them when they left the courtroom. Young faces, old trauma. Some were crying. Some looked numb. All of them were braver than I'd ever be. I was called on day 3 of the trial. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with journalists, victims' families, and observers. Brennan sat at the defense table in a suit, looking nothing like the friendly coach who'd bought us pizza. His attorney was the expensive lawyer named Richard Kavanaugh, who specialized in defending the indefensible. I took the stand, swore to tell the truth, and looked at the prosecutor. She started with easy questions. Name, age, relationship to Brennan. Then she moved to the substance. Can you describe how you first met Gerald Brennan? I told the jury about 4th grade, about joining the hockey team, about Brennan becoming our coach. Over the 6 years you knew him, did your family develop a personal relationship with the Brennan family? Yes. Dinners, vacations, holidays. Did your father trust Gerald Brennan? Completely. Did Gerald Brennan ever ask your father for professional favors? Yes. The recommendation letter. The prosecutor showed the jury a copy. And did your father provide this recommendation enthusiastically? He did. The questions continued for 90 minutes. The prosecutor walked me through every interaction, building a picture of how Brennan had embedded himself in our lives. Then she got to the fabricated evidence. When did you first learn that your father had been implicated in the investigation? The night they picked me up from Nolan's house. How did that feel? I paused. The prosecutor had told me to stick to facts, but she'd just asked for feelings. Confusing, terrifying. We trusted Mr. Brennan completely. Finding out he was under investigation was shocking. Finding out he'd tried to frame my father was devastating. The prosecutor nodded. Did you ever suspect Gerald Brennan was abusing children? No. Did your parents suspect? No. Why not? Because he was good at hiding it. Because he'd spent years building trust specifically so no one would suspect. The prosecutor let that answer hang in the air before sitting down. Kavanaugh, the defense attorney, stood up slowly. He was in his 60s, silver hair, expensive watch. Mr. Reeves, you testified that you never suspected my client of any wrongdoing. Yes. But you also testified that you spent significant time with him over 6 years. Yes. And in all that time you never saw anything inappropriate? Nothing that made you uncomfortable? Nothing that struck you as odd? I understood what he was doing. If I said yes, I was admitting I'd seen warning signs and ignored them. If I said no, I was admitting Brennan had been perfectly normal, which undermined the prosecution's case. Mr. E. Brennan was skilled at appearing normal. That was the whole point. If he'd been obviously suspicious, he would never have gained access to victims. Kavanaugh smiled. So, you're saying he fooled you? Yes. He fooled your parents? Yes. He fooled entire communities across multiple states? Yes. And yet you expect this jury to believe he was running a sophisticated criminal enterprise while maintaining this perfect facade? I looked at Brennan. He was watching me with empty eyes. The FBI found hard drives at his house. They found photographs. They found financial records of payments to services that help people hide criminal activity. The evidence isn't about what people believed. It's about what he actually did. Kavanaugh's smile faded. Answer the question I asked, Mr. Reeves. Do you expect this jury to believe? The prosecutor objected. The judge sustained it. Kavanaugh tried a different angle. You're angry at my client, aren't you? Yes. Because the investigation disrupted your life. I kept my voice level. I'm angry because he hurt kids. I'm angry because he tried to frame my father to cover it up. I'm angry because he's a predator who exploited people's trust for over a decade. Kavanaugh's expression hardened. Isn't it true that you're testifying here today, hoping to restore your family's reputation? I looked at the jury. Our reputation is destroyed. Testifying won't fix that. I'm here because 19 kids deserve justice. And if my testimony helps prove what Mr. Brennan did, then it's worth it. The defense couldn't shake me. Kavanaugh tried for another 30 minutes. But every question I answered calmly, factually, without the anger he was trying to provoke. When I stepped down, the prosecutor caught my eye and nodded. I'd done what they needed. The trial continued for 2 more weeks. The FBI's cybercrime expert testified about tracing the fabricated emails back to Brennan. He'd made mistakes, reused certain digital signatures, left breadcrumbs in the metadata that connected him to the fraud. The expert explained how Brennan had hired someone on the dark web to create the fake evidence, paying in cryptocurrency that was eventually traced back to his accounts. Mr. Brennan's mistake was reusing the same European server farm for multiple criminal communications. We were able to link the email fabrication to other illegal activity he was engaged in. The technical testimony was dense, but the conclusion was clear. Brennan had created the false evidence against my father personally, using sophisticated tools but making critical errors. More victims testified. Their accounts were consistent, describing the same pattern of grooming, isolation, manipulation, and abuse. Brennan's defense tried to argue that the victims were coordinating their stories, that they'd been influenced by media coverage and each other's testimonies. The prosecution destroyed that argument by showing that many victims had come forward independently before knowing about the others, and their accounts matched in details that had never been made public. The defense tried to suggest that Brennan's wife had been involved, that she'd known about the abuse and helped facilitate it. The prosecution called Mrs. Brennan to the stand. She testified that she'd had no knowledge of her husband's crimes, that she'd been deceived like everyone else, and that she'd cooperated fully with the FBI once she learned the truth. The jury believed her. I watched her testify and felt a complicated sympathy. She'd lost her husband, her reputation, her children's stability. She was a victim, too. The trial's final week focused on the financial crimes. Brennan had been embezzling from his company for years, using the money to fund his activities and buy silence. He'd paid off at least 2 families who'd discovered what he was doing, offering them money in exchange for confidentiality agreements. Those families testified about how Brennan had threatened them, told them no one would believe their children, convinced them that going public would destroy their kids more than staying quiet. The prosecution presented evidence that Brennan had been planning to flee the country when the FBI arrested him. He'd purchased plane tickets to a country with no extradition treaty, transferred money to offshore accounts, and sold assets quickly in the weeks before his arrest. The defense had no credible response. Their entire strategy had been to create doubt, to suggest the investigation was flawed or politically motivated. But the evidence was overwhelming. Hard drives, bank records, victim testimony, digital forensics, all pointing to the same conclusion. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. We waited in Vivian's office, watching news coverage of the trial, reading the endless speculation about the verdict. When the call came that the jury had reached a decision, we went back to the courthouse. The courtroom was silent as the jury forewoman stood. On count 1, we find the defendant guilty. She continued through all 38 counts. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Brennan showed no reaction. His attorney sat with his head in his hands. The victims' families cried and hugged each other. My parents sat perfectly still, hands clasped together. The judge thanked the jury and set a sentencing date for 4 weeks later. We filed out of the courtroom, past reporters shouting questions. Vivian made a brief statement. Justice was served today. The Reeves family is grateful to the FBI, the prosecution team, and especially to the brave survivors who came forward. That was it. We went back to the hotel. Sentencing came on a cold morning in March. The courtroom was full again, every victim who wanted to speak getting their chance. Ashley Portman went first. She was 17 now, preparing to graduate high school despite everything Brennan had stolen from her. She read a statement describing the nightmares, the therapy, the ruined friendships, the loss of innocence. You made me afraid of every adult who tried to help me. You made me doubt my own perceptions. You made me feel like I was crazy when I knew something was wrong. I'm not crazy. You're evil. 18 more victims spoke. Some were calm, some were angry, all were devastated. The judge listened to every word. Then he addressed Brennan. You used your position of trust to prey on vulnerable children. You manipulated entire communities. And when you were caught, you attempted to destroy an innocent family to create reasonable doubt about your own guilt. You represent the worst of humanity. He sentenced Brennan to the maximum on every count, to be served consecutively. 340 years. Brennan was led away in shackles. I watched from the gallery next to my parents. We'd won. It felt like losing. The media coverage after sentencing was intense but brief. Within a week, another scandal dominated the news cycle, and Brennan's case faded from the headlines. We were yesterday's story. The FBI issued a final statement confirming that their investigation had concluded, that all involved parties had been held accountable, and that they'd identified no evidence of a larger network. Special Agent Kozlowski held a press conference where she acknowledged that the Reeves family had been, unfortunately, caught in the crossfire of a complex investigation. Unfortunately. That was the word she used. As if our destroyed lives were an unfortunate but acceptable cost of prosecuting Brennan. No apology, no acknowledgement that they could have cleared us sooner. Just, unfortunately. Dad watched the press conference with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not sadness, resignation. He'd given up expecting justice for us. The system had worked to prosecute Brennan. It had failed to protect us. Both things were true. We moved to Montana in April. The clinic Dad was working at was in a town of 8,000 people, 3 hours from the nearest city. The landscape was beautiful in a harsh way, mountains and sky and endless space. Our new house was smaller than the rental we'd left, but it was ours, purchased with what remained of the settlement money and Mom's inheritance from her parents. Dad started work immediately, treating patients who couldn't afford to go anywhere else. The clinic was understaffed and overwhelmed, but Dad was grateful to be practicing medicine again. Mom got a job doing medical billing remotely, work she could do from home under her maiden name. I enrolled in the local high school for my final semester, using my middle name instead of my first. I was just another new kid in a small town. Nobody knew our story. Nobody asked questions. Making friends was impossible at first. I'd spent so long being defensive, expecting everyone to know who I was and judge me, that I couldn't relax around people. But gradually, slowly, I found a few kids who accepted me without digging into my past. We played pickup basketball after school. We worked on group projects. We talked about normal things like sports and college and summer plans. It felt like being human again. I told exactly one person the truth about why we'd moved. His name was Isaiah, a senior planning to study computer science. We were working on a physics project together when he mentioned his older sister had been assaulted by a teacher at her previous school. The school board covered it up, made her out to be a liar. We had to move districts. I looked at him and made a decision. Something similar happened to my family. Different situation, but we got caught in something that wasn't our fault. Isaiah nodded. You don't have to tell me details. I get it. He never asked for the full story. He just accepted that I had one. I graduated in May. Small ceremony, 43 students, no media attention. Mom and Dad sat in the bleachers and cried because 6 months ago, they'd thought I might not graduate at all. I'd pulled my grades up in the final semester, worked with tutors, finished the credits I needed. My college prospects were limited, but I'd been accepted to the state university with a partial scholarship. I'd study criminal justice, maybe law eventually. I couldn't change what had happened to us, but I could try to help other people navigate the system that had chewed us up. Vivian had offered to write me a recommendation letter. You'd make a good attorney. You're clear-headed under pressure. You understand how institutions fail people. I didn't know if that was a compliment or just an observation. Either way, I accepted her offer. Summer was quiet. I worked at a hardware store, saved money for college, spent evenings hiking in the mountains. The physical distance from everything that had happened helped. In Montana, I wasn't Ethan Reeves, son of the doctor falsely accused in the Brennan case. I was just Ethan, the kid who worked at Miller's Hardware and didn't talk much about where he came from. Dad's clinic work was exhausting but meaningful. He'd come home tired and tell stories about patients he'd helped, people who had nowhere else to go. It wasn't the prestigious cardiology practice he'd built, but it was medicine. It mattered. Mom had started volunteering at a domestic violence shelter, doing intake work and helping survivors navigate legal resources. She said it gave her purpose, a way to transform what we'd been through into something useful. Our family had changed. We were quieter, more careful, but we were functional. The first anniversary of the FBI raid passed without acknowledgement. We didn't talk about it. What was there to say? A year ago, our lives had exploded. Now we were rebuilding in a place where nobody knew the details. I thought about Nolan sometimes, wondered how he was doing. I'd heard through Vivian that he'd changed his last name legally, trying to distance himself from his father. Kelsey had been adopted by her aunt and was in therapy. Mrs. Brennan had moved to a different state and was working under a different name. The Brennan family had fractured into pieces, everyone trying to survive the fallout of Gerald Brennan's choices. I felt guilt about that sometimes, survivor's guilt maybe, because at least my father had been innocent. Nolan's father was in prison for the rest of his life. How did you process that? I started college in August, State University, criminal justice program, living in a dorm with a roommate who knew nothing about my past. I introduced myself as Ethan Cole, using my mother's maiden name, and nobody questioned it. The coursework was interesting, classes on constitutional law and criminal procedure and forensic science. I was good at it. The professors noticed. One of them, Dr. Levine, pulled me aside after class 3 weeks into the semester. You think about these issues differently than most students. You have perspective they don't. I asked what he meant. He smiled. Most 18-year-olds view the justice system theoretically. You engage with it personally. I don't know what you've experienced, and you don't have to tell me. But whatever it is, it's given you insights that will make you a strong advocate someday. I thanked him and left before he could ask follow-up questions. Vivian called me in October. She'd been contacted by a journalist writing a long-form article about wrongful accusations in federal investigations. They want to interview you and your parents. It could be good for you, set the record straight in a comprehensive way. I asked Dad what he thought. He was quiet for a long time. I don't know if setting the record straight is possible anymore, Ethan. But maybe it helps someone else. Maybe another family going through this reads the article and feels less alone. We agreed to do the interview. The journalist, a woman named Carolyn Fletcher, flew to Montana and spent 3 days with us. She was thorough and respectful, asking hard questions but not exploitative ones. The article ran in January, nearly 18 months after the FBI raid. It was titled, Collateral Damage: How an FBI Investigation Destroyed an Innocent Family. The piece was balanced, acknowledging the necessity of investigating Brennan while documenting the failures that had amplified our suffering. The article went viral, not in the way the initial scandal had, but in a thoughtful way that generated actual discussion. Legal scholars debated the balance between effective investigation and protecting innocent people caught in the periphery. Victims' advocates praised the FBI for prosecuting Brennan while criticizing their handling of collateral damage. Some readers commented that we should be grateful Brennan was in prison and stop complaining about the cost. Others recognized that both things mattered, that justice for victims and protection of innocent people weren't mutually exclusive goals. The article led to speaking invitations. A law school wanted Dad to participate in a panel about wrongful accusations. A victims' rights organization wanted me to speak about the ripple effects of criminal investigations. We declined most of them. We weren't activists. We were just people trying to rebuild. I started helping Vivian with other cases in my second semester of college. Research work, mostly. Looking through documents, identifying inconsistencies, building timelines. She had 3 active cases involving fabricated evidence. people whose lives had been upended by false accusations in various contexts. I learned that what happened to us wasn't unique. The methods varied, but the pattern was the same. Someone with malicious intent creates false evidence. Authorities believe it initially because it's sophisticated. The accused person's life implodes. Eventually, the truth emerges, but the damage is permanent. Vivian was fighting to change laws to create better protections for people caught in these situations. The burden of proof should be higher for evidence that destroys someone's reputation, she told me. Right now, the system treats reputational harm as acceptable collateral damage. That needs to change. I agreed to help her draft policy proposals. The civil suit against the FBI never happened. Vivian and Dad discussed it for months, weighing the potential benefits against the costs. Ultimately, they decided that litigation would mean years of depositions, media attention, and legal fees with no guarantee of winning. The FBI followed procedure, Vivian explained. They executed a legal warrant based on evidence they believed was credible. The fact that the evidence was fabricated doesn't make their actions illegal. It makes them wrong, but wrong isn't the same as liable. Dad accepted that conclusion with the same resignation he'd shown at Kozlowski's press conference. The system had worked to prosecute Brennan. It had failed to protect us. We couldn't change that through a lawsuit. We could only move forward. By my sophomore year of college, I'd stopped using my mother's maiden name. I was Ethan Reeves again, not hiding, but not advertising either. If people asked about my background, I gave them the basic outline without details. Most didn't press. The friends I made in college were genuine, people who valued me for who I was rather than the scandal I'd survived. I joined the pre-law society, started volunteering with legal aid clinics, built a life that had nothing to do with Gerald Brennan. But the scar remained. I was hyper-vigilant about trust. I researched everyone I met, looking for inconsistencies, warning signs, reasons to doubt. It was exhausting and probably unhealthy, but I couldn't stop. Isaiah, my friend from high school, called it survivor instinct. You learn that people can wear masks. You won't unlearn that. You just have to find people whose real faces match their masks. It was good advice. I tried to follow it. Dad received a formal apology from the hospital 3 years after the FBI raid, not a public statement. A private letter from the hospital board's chairman acknowledging that the administrative leave had been an overreaction and offering to restore his privileges if he wanted to return. Dad declined. He was established in Montana now, connected to his patients, doing work that mattered. Going back would mean returning to a place that had abandoned him when he needed support. The apology was appreciated, but insufficient. Mom had similar experiences. Her old nonprofit reached out asking if she'd consider returning as a consultant. She said no. She'd built something new, and returning to the old felt like regression. We'd all moved forward. We weren't the same people we'd been before the raid, and trying to reclaim our old lives would mean pretending we were. I graduated college with honors and got accepted to law school. Multiple schools offered admission, but I chose one in Montana, staying close to my parents. They'd sacrificed everything in the aftermath of Brennan's crimes, and I wasn't ready to leave them. Law school was brutal, endless reading and pressure and competition, but I was good at it. The same skills that had helped me survive the investigation served me in analyzing cases, identifying weaknesses in arguments, constructing persuasive narratives. I clerked for Vivian during my summers, working on wrongful accusation cases and policy reform. We won some. We lost some. The work was slow and frustrating, but it was necessary. Every person we helped was someone who didn't have to endure what we had. The 10th anniversary of Brennan's sentencing passed without media coverage. A decade is long enough for most stories to fade from public memory. Occasionally, someone would recognize our name and make the connection, but it was rare. We'd successfully faded into obscurity, which had always been the goal. Brennan was still in prison, serving his sentence in a maximum security facility. I'd heard through legal channels that he'd been attacked twice by other inmates who targeted child predators. He'd survived but lived in protective segregation. I felt nothing about that. Not satisfaction, not sympathy. Just a distant acknowledgement that consequences had occurred. Ashley Portman had graduated college and was working as a victim's advocate. Several other survivors had become therapists, teachers, mentors. They'd transformed their trauma into purpose. I respected that immensely. I passed the bar exam on my first attempt and joined Vivian's firm as an associate attorney. My focus was wrongful accusations and fabricated evidence cases, helping people navigate the nightmare we'd survived. The work was emotionally difficult but meaningful. I understood what clients were experiencing in a way most attorneys couldn't. I knew the paralyzing fear of having your life scrutinized, the rage at being disbelieved, the exhaustion of proving innocence. I could sit across from someone whose world was collapsing and say honestly, I know what you're going through, and they believed me because it was true. Vivian said I had a natural talent for the work. I thought it was less about talent and more about hard-earned understanding. Either way, I was helping people. That mattered. Dad retired from the clinic at 65. He'd spent 15 years there, treating patients who had nowhere else to go. The town held a retirement party for him, dozens of people showing up to thank him for his care. Many of them knew about the Brennan case by then, knew what Dad had survived before coming to Montana. They didn't care. They knew him as the doctor who'd treated their children, saved their lives, spent extra time explaining diagnoses. His reputation in that community was built on his actions over 15 years, not on a scandal from his past. That was redemption, the kind you earn slowly through consistency. Mom continued her work with the domestic violence shelter, eventually becoming their volunteer coordinator. She trained other volunteers, developed protocols for helping survivors navigate complex systems. She was good at it because she'd lived it. I got married at 32 to someone who knew my entire story before our first date. Her name was Lauren, and she was a social worker who'd read the Carolyn Fletcher article in grad school. When we matched on a dating app, she recognized my name immediately. "I should tell you that I know who you are," she said on our first date. "I read about what happened to your family. If you want to talk about it, I'm here. If you don't, that's fine too." I appreciated the directness. We talked about it eventually, but it wasn't the foundation of our relationship. It was part of my history, not the defining feature of my identity. We built something new together, separate from the trauma. My parents came to the wedding. Vivian was there. A few close friends from college and law school. It was small and perfect. I think about that night sometimes still. The headlights at 2:14 a.m. My father's voice. The moment my life split into before and after. We survived. That's the reality. We lost careers, relationships, peace of mind, years of our lives to anxiety and rebuilding. But we survived. The system that failed us also eventually worked, prosecuting Brennan and clearing our names legally, if not always publicly. It's a complicated legacy. I work now to make the system better, to protect other families from experiencing what we did. Small victories, incremental changes. It's not dramatic or satisfying, but it's real. My parents live quietly in Montana, connected to a community that values them. I practice law, help people navigate injustice, and go home to someone who knows all my scars and loves me anyway. Life is smaller than it would have been. It's also fuller in ways I couldn't have imagined. We built meaning from suffering. Not because it was fair, or because we had a choice, but because it was the only path forward. And we keep walking it, one day at a time, carrying what we've learned into whatever comes next. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.